For those of you who don't know, most of you don't know, nobody knows except for maybe the people that I know. I like knitting. I like crochet. I'm very passionate about making my own clothes. I'm very anti-consumerist as much as possible, and for me, the way to do that is to make my own clothes or find them secondhand. But usually, I prefer making my own clothes. And I think you should too. That's a whole other video. But I really want to talk about the best kept secret on the internet for fiber artists specifically. When I was in middle school, I was really into looking on this website because I really liked looking at old shit. I like looking at stuff that's kind of like, like cataloging experiences, images, videos. Like I love looking at that kind of stuff, and I love libraries. So when I was in middle school, I was like really into this one website. And recently I've sort of delved back into it. And it occurred to me that because this website operates like a library, there might be some resources on fiber arts. And what I found was 10 times better than that. So to put things sweetly, shortly, and to wrap up this introduction, today I'm going to be talking about the knitting world's best kept secret, and that is the Internet Archive. This website, the Internet Archive, is an organization that archives a bunch of internet stuff and even like books and shit online. And I love looking at their stuff because sometimes on there you can find things that like are way out of print, or things that you've heard about but you literally can't experience because of like legal reasons or whatever. If you know what the Wayback Machine is, that is a part of the Internet Archive. They're a very popular and very powerful database of a bunch of information. And they have a section on books and text. And I got really curious one day and I was like, I wonder if there's some knitting books on here. Because if you go to a library, if you go to, anywhere, a lot of arts and crafts or libraries or bookstores, whatever, have arts and crafts sections. And in those arts and crafts sections, as a fiber artist, many of you know that you can find knitting books. And those knitting books contain patterns, usually around like 15 to 50 patterns. Like if it's like a magazine, maybe it's like less than that, like 5 or 6. But anyway, the point is that you can find a bunch of knitting patterns in one place. Now, a lot of this has fallen out of popularity in the last couple years with the internet coming to prominence. The fiber arts community has moved more online, and like you have sites like Ravelry and people selling their patterns on Etsy. You see less people coming out with like knitting and crochet books. I would say like the last time I really saw people in the fiber arts community like actively coming out with books is probably like the mid to late 2010s, but closer to like the mid 2010s I think is when the trend of knitting and crochet books started to really fall off in favor of like online sharing of your patterns and stuff as a fiber designer, which means one of two things. One, most of the books and patterns that I discovered on the Internet Archive are vintage, or again at the latest mid 2010s back. I am somebody who loves vintage fashion. I know that vintage fashion has obviously made a comeback and has inspired a lot of like current trends in fashion, especially in like fiber arts community. And a lot of people, I've seen so many video essays, including this one and stuff like this, where people are going back and they're talking about how knits just aren't built the same anymore. And part of that has to do with the fact that people don't make their own knitwear anymore. And so having access to vintage patterns is really cool. The second thing I discovered is that a lot of this stuff is really, it's like you're really getting your bang for your buck. Obviously, the Internet Archive's stuff is free. So when I was looking on here, it really dawned on me. I was like, wow, I can look at a book for an hour and have access to multiple, like upwards of like 30 knitting patterns or crochet patterns in one book at a time for free. I realized that the Internet Archive is actually an incredible untapped resource for fiber artists, and specifically knitters. I found less crochet stuff. I did find some felting stuff, but mostly it was knitting books. So today, apart from the fact that I wanted to bring people's attention to the fact that there are an incredible, insane amount of knitting books on the Internet Archive, I wanted to actually talk about some of my favorites. So let's get right into it. Yeah. First book that I want to talk about is called Knit Couture by Gail Downey and Henry Conway. It's 20 patterns. It was published, I believe, in like 2008, so like late 2000s. These patterns, I would say, are very, very on trend right now. Like a lot of these vintage patterns, I think I could see on any like popular influencer or like fashion girly, whatever. Like these are very timeless sort of patterns. There's a lot of cardigans. A lot of these are very like ballet core type vibe. My favorite probably has to be the chevron knit cardigan. There's also a really good pattern for a really like dainty looking shrug in there that I also think is worth your time. And there's a couple of knit dresses too, which are also really cute. The second book that I discovered on this website is a book called Country Knits by Carol Huber. And also there's a sequel called Country Knits 2. The first book has 23 patterns. They're all sweaters. So the base sweater pattern is like pretty much the same. What makes this book special, in my opinion, is the intarsia or the graphics that Carol Huber adds to the base sweater pattern. When I say country knit, I don't want you to picture like English countryside, cottagecore type vibes. I want you to picture like folk American art. We're talking like quilting and Appalachia design wear type stuff. Very much Americana type country. There's a really beautiful pattern. I think it might be in Country Knits too, and it's like a flower pattern. It's like sort of like a gold flower and a black background sort of checker pattern, and I'm obsessed. Like that's probably the first one that I'm gonna make. The next one would be this book called The Country Diary Book of Knitting. This was published in 1987 by Annette Mitchell. This book is like English countryside type cottagecore knitting. I love this book. Again, these patterns are vintage. They're definitely like a product of their time, which is good for me. I love 80s, 90s, early 2000s knitwear. That's like my bread and butter. And what I really like about this book, it's not just like knitwear, like it's not just fashion. In the back of the book, there are some like home decor patterns, like pillowcases and stuff too. And the way that it's organized is by season, so fall, winter, spring, summer. And they have knits. I would say things that you could probably do at any level. Some things are more complicated than others, but a lot of it is just like the type of stitch that they're using. It's very straightforward. The next book that I want to talk about is called Knitting Lingerie Style by Joan McGowan Michael. This book was published in 2007. And I really love this book. If you like knitting like underwear, or I've seen a lot of like crochet girlies on my Instagram, specifically like this artist. I've seen her do a lot of like lingerie, like panties and bralettes and stuff like that. This book is knitting. There is some incorporation of crochet for like lace detailing and stuff like that. I think there is at least one project that is fully just crochet. But this book is really good. Like genuinely, the patterns in here are really cute. I feel like sometimes when I see people doing like knit lingerie of any kind, part of me is like, it feels kind of costumey, but the patterns in this book don't feel that way to me. My favorite pattern in the book, but probably one of the more difficult patterns, is what is it called? There's like, it's like a leotard, but it's like not like a leotard. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, yeah, there's a garter pattern in here. There's a really cute bra pattern. There's a slip pattern, and there isn't just lingerie. There's like lingerie inspired clothing items. So like fashions that we see that are inspired by lingerie. There are also patterns for stuff like that in here too. The next one is also in the same vein. It's called Naughty Needles. It's by Nicole Lore, and this was published in 2006. This one is more campy. If the other one is more like serious, like hot girl type lingerie, very delicate, very subdued, very fashion, this one is camp as fuck. This is like one of the funny, like silly, but also still really great pattern books that I remember from like my childhood, or at least like seeing a lot of when I was growing up. And this was published in 2006, so it makes sense because it very much is reminiscent of that time in knitwear. Nicole Lore, her patterns are very campy, very silly. There's some like BDSM stuff in there. Like there's like a ball gag pattern. There is a pattern for like a fembot like lingerie costume set. There's a pattern for like stockings. There's a pattern for like knee-high length socks called Kinderhore. Like this book is camp as fuck. I also appreciate that the models are like normal looking women. They're not like super skinny. They're like mid-size women who you would see like on the street probably. And they all look really good. I think these designs are really fun and campy and silly. This is like one of the gayest knitting books I've ever seen in my life. And I'm saying that with like the highest, utmost respect for Nicole Lore. And anybody who reads this will like, you guys have to tell me if you agree with me on that, because I genuinely believe that it is like one of the queerest knitting books I've ever seen, like unironically. I don't know if that makes any fucking sense, but just trust me on this one. This is like top 3 favorite knitting books I've ever seen in my life, and I discovered it on the Internet Archive. This book is called Fairy Tale Knits by Katharina Ritter, and this was published in 2011. This book, I fucking love this book. This is not a costume book. A lot of people see Fairy Tale Knits and they think, oh, it's like costumey. It's like, you know, like there's another book that I know, not by Katharina Ritter. I don't know who the knitting artist is. I think it's called like Vampire Knits. And a lot of it, again, is very campy, very costumey. This is not. This is like, she took the concept of fairy tales and then created like knitwear designs that had like similar vibes to the ideas in the fairy tale. So like there's a really gorgeous sweater that I keep thinking about it. Like I need that fucking sweater. It's literally haunting me in my dreams because it's beautiful. It's called The Little Mermaid. It's like an off the shoulder, oversized knit, and in this like deep blue color. It's beautiful. And the photography in this book is gorgeous. Something I love about a lot of these knitting books is the photography. I love looking at knitting book photography. This is definitely up there. Has a very dreamy sort of aesthetic. If you like coquette fashion kind of vibes, like very delicate, feminine type knits, this is the place to look. There's a dress pattern in here that's beautiful. They have, she has like a sock pattern, like a knee-high sock pattern, and it's like this really beautiful like knit lace pattern. She has like arm warmers in the same sort of knit lace pattern. This is definitely one of my top 3 favorite books I've ever found on this site, or ever discovered, like, period, and I literally would not have found it without the Internet Archive, so definitely check this out. This next book, to die for. I'm so serious. This book is called Vintage Knits, 30 Exquisite Vintage Inspired Patterns for Cardigans, Twin Sets, Crew Necks, and more. This was made by Sarah Dallas and published in 2002. This book is my dream book. This is like probably top 2 favorites. This is competing. I'm always thinking about this book because the patterns in this book are great. She takes a lot of patterns from like the 50s and the 40s and she adapts them for the early 2000s. So if you're a fan of early 2000s fashion, you should fucking read this book. Like, you should look at the patterns in this book. There's a ribbed cardigan in here that I think is gorgeous. There's a lace camisole that is like to die for, very feminine, very delicate, very beautiful. The instructions are very clear. I liked this book. The photography in this book is also gorgeous. The way that she styles each piece, the way the photographer styled each piece for this book was beautiful. I actually genuinely want to get my hands on a copy of this book, like a real physical copy, because I think that this book is so worth it. Like, I love this book. Especially if you're into early 2000s knits. This book, it's called Vintage Knits. It is an adaptation of 40s and 30s and 50s patterns. It's definitely more modern. It's leaning more into the modern edge. She perfectly blends that vintage edge, but it's giving early 2000s and late 90s, and you should definitely you should do the patterns in this book. It's so beautiful. The next book is called Floral Knitting by Susan Duckworth. This was published in 1991. This book also giving cottagecore, but less cottagecore and more like contemporary cottagecore. Like if you were to mix like the aesthetics of the 90s with the cottagecore vibe, this is that book. I'm not really big on inner tarsia and stuff like that. I'm kind of scared of it. I've done a couple swatches, but I'm genuinely, like, I feel like I will fuck it up every single time. I'm so afraid. But this book this book is like forcing me to be like, okay, maybe I really should learn how to do this because these sweaters are kind of cool. These florals are not for everyone. They have florals based on like, I think like the different kinds of plants. So there's like one for berries, one for like leaf stuff, one for like certain types of flowers. Again, if you like floral patterns, if you like vintage florals, 80s, 90s florals, you should check this out. And it has the graphs, the inner-tarsia graphs in the book as well. Next book is the Vogue Knitting series. At the risk of sounding like a 12-year-old boy, this series is fucking goated as shit. This was published in the late 90s and the early 2000s by Vogue. And they did a bunch of different books. Not all of them are knitting books, actually. You have the Vogue Knitting Pillows book. You have Vogue Knitting Mittens and Gloves, Vogue Knitting Caps and Hats, Vogue Knitting Chunky Knits. They also have a book on crochet hats and crochet scarves, and a book on felting too, which I was really shocked that they would include that, but yes, they did. There's literally like probably around 10 to 15 books in this series. That's not an accurate number, but there's a lot. There's a lot of them. My favorite has to be the Vogue Knitting Chunky Knits, Vogue Knitting Felting, Vogue Knitting Scarves too, and Vogue Knitting Bags. The Bags book is a fucking straight banger. Horrendously obsessed with that book. The patterns in that book are gorgeous. And they incorporate felting patterns too and crochet patterns in that book. But that book is, oh my god, it's literally to die for. I would make like almost every bag in that book. It's incredible. I think it was published in the late 90s, like 98 or something. The next book is called Hollywood Knits, 30 Original Sus Designs by Sus Cousins. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but it's published in 2002. So the title, originally I thought, okay, this is like knitting patterns from like movies, like inspired by movie clothes. No. Apparently this person is like friends with a bunch of celebrities, like a shit ton of celebrities. So the like gimmick to this book is that they made a bunch of like patterns and like really cute stuff. But they photographed celebrities wearing them that are like friends with the designer, which is like so weird because I've never fucking heard of this person. Like they have to be some kind of nepo baby because the existence of this book is so weird. But some of the patterns are genuinely cute. And there are some like, and because this was published in like 2002, the celebrities are like people that I saw in a lot of movies growing up. Like I'm just like, how do you know this person? Why do you know this person? How much was this person paid to promote your silly book? This is crazy. But yeah, there's like an ad for their knitting classes in the beginning as like part of the forward. They're like, I do knitting classes in Hollywood. And I'm like, what is this? Like, it's one of the weirdest knitting books I've ever seen in my life, but the patterns are genuinely kind of cute. There's some really nice like sweater patterns and scarf patterns and stuff like that. I think it's worth checking out because there's going to be at least one pattern that somebody really enjoys in here, and it's free. So check it out, I guess. I don't know. Very, very strange experience. This next one I really like, and I also am going to shoehorn in the mention of another book, which I've actually seen on the Internet Archive, but I own a physical copy of, so I don't have it saved in the Internet Archive. This book is called Punk Knits, 26 Hot New Designs for Anarchist Souls and Independent Spirits by Cher Ross, and this was published in 2007. This book I think is really cute for the alt knitting girlies, and is only one of two quote-unquote punk knitting books I've literally ever seen in my entire life. Both of which were published, I think, around the same time, because the one that I owned is definitely published either late 90s or like early 2000s or late 2000s type vibes. The other book I'm talking about is called Punk Knits, but it's or Punk Knitting, something like that. That book is really good. Of the two, I prefer the one that I own the physical copy of, but Punk Knits by Cher Ross I think is also worth looking at. A lot of her inspiration is actually not punk music. A lot of it is like low-key like glam rock type shit. But there are really good patterns in here. There are some cool pages talking about like how to include intentional distressing in your knits, sort of like dropping stitches intentionally and like techniques on how to do that, and a lot of her patterns include that sort of thing. There are leg warmers, scarves, sweaters. There's like a mini skirt inspired by Blondie, which again, not really punk, but it's alternative, so I think it counts. And there's 26 patterns in here. I definitely think it's worth a shot. A lot of the models, there's like a page in the back about the models. The photography in this book is really fun too. But the page in the back about the models talks about how they're like, a lot of them are like part of her local like alternative scene. And I was looking at these and I was like, oh my god, I wonder what they're doing now. Like, that's crazy. So if somebody ever finds out like where these people are now, I would love to know. Please tell me. The next book is called Romantic Style, Knits and Crochet to Wear or Display by Jenny Atkinson, and this was published in 2007. Another banger, very feminine, very romantic, kind of like a 1920s vibe, like weirdly, like I think of like The Great Gatsby when I was looking at these patterns. Again, if you like very feminine, almost coquette, dainty sort of knits, definitely check this out. The photography is also really beautiful in this book. There are some really gorgeous cardigans and shrugs. And yeah, there are also some, I think, like necklace patterns, like for crochet, like lace crochet necklaces, like a necklace pattern, and bags and other stuff. There's a throw blanket on here that's really pretty. There's a bunch of shit. This is definitely one of my top favorite books. Very fashionable, very feminine, very timeless sort of knits. The next book, this book is really cute. It's called Dolce Knits by Kim Dolce. It was published in 2010. Again, another good year for knitting books, or another good start for the knitting books stuff. These are really cute, very contemporary, not like 2010s fashion per se. There are some things in there that are definitely like, okay, bro, like I see you, like this is giving 2010, but I really like this book. I found some really, really cute patterns in here, and I genuinely, there's a really nice camisole top. I'm finding that the patterns that I gravitate towards the most are these really delicate, like sort of camisole tops, like the one on the cover, which is a pattern in the book. The photography is really nice. There's about 100 pages. I mean, obviously some of it is like a foreword and shit like that, but there's a lot of information in here, and definitely something to look out for. This next book I was curious about, and definitely there's at least one pattern in here that I think somebody will like. So it's called Modern Top-Down Knitting, Sweaters, Dresses, Skirts, and Accessories Inspired by the Techniques of Barbara Walker. Except that this book was not written by Barbara Walker. It was written by Christina McGowan, and photographed by Gudrun McGowan. The photography in this book is really nice. Also published in 2010. This one is giving a little bit more 2010 fashion vibes. My favorite pattern is the dress pattern on the cover. It's sort of this like, you can see the seams on the outside, but the construction looks really nice. And it's top-down knitting. If you like top-down knitting and you want more modern patterns, I think this book, modern by like 2010s type or late 2000s type fashion, definitely check this out. It's definitely giving like city girl, like Austin, Texas city girl in 2009, 2010 type vibes. Like that's kind of the aesthetic you're going for. A little twee in some places, I think. But yeah, there's at least one good pattern in here for every knitter, at least one. And I like that they're using this specific technique. I like that they're advertising that it's a specific technique. I think it's good for people who like top-down knitting. I've never tried it, but I have to now because I have to make this dress. But anyway, okay, this one's more of like an honorary mention. It's called Luxe Knits, Couture Designs to Knit and Crochet by Laura Zukaite. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but it came out in 2009. This book it's giving, like, okay, do you remember when you were like a little kid? This is for like the people who grew up with this specifically. Might be a very niche experience. Do you remember when you were a kid and you would get like those like paper dolls, and they had like Barbie paper doll type shit? And the fashion, it was like, oh my god, this is high couture, runway fashion. But it was like, it was kind of costumey couture, like campy in a weird way. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? That's the vibe of these patterns. There's no other way for me to describe the aesthetic of this book than what's similar to that. Because of the way that the author and the designer of these pages formatted the patterns. And one, the designs themselves are definitely giving like, if Barbie wrote a fashion couture knitting book in 2005 or 2009. That's the vibe of this book. And if you fuck with that, this is for you. Very campy, again, very campy, not really 100% my style. There are some things that I thought were really interesting. There's like a Batwing sweater, not Batwing, I forget, but there's like a specific kind of armhole. It's okay, I'll figure it out later. Maybe I'll scream it into the void just right now. Dolman. This book is crazy, and it took me like 30 minutes just to flip through it. It's called 100 Purses to Knit and Crochet by Jean Linehauser, and this was published in 2006. When it says 100, it literally means there are 100 knitting patterns in this fucking book. It's 264 pages of just knitting patterns and like a foreword and some index shit. But like genuinely, it's like at least 255 of those pages are just knitting pattern information. There's a lot of shit in this book. If you don't find at least one pattern you like in this book, you're fucking lying. There's a lot of really cute stuff. There's a combination of like knit and crochet and each pattern to some extent. I think there is at least 1 or 2 bags that incorporate some level of felting, but don't quote me on that. I could be misremembering because there's genuinely so many bags. I can't remember half the ones that I saved. Too many. This one is actually the hot girl knitting book. It's like for real, this is the hot girl knitting book. It's called Sexy Little Knits, Chic Designs to Knit and Crochet by Ashley Page from 2006. It's 132 pages. I don't remember how many patterns are in here, but this is actually the hot girl knitting book. But when she says sexy little knits, it's giving sexy little knits. And there's like bikini patterns in here. There's like super micro mini shorts, like really cute shit. Like really cute shit. Like genuinely, this book is great. This book is really great. Again, definitely top five for me. Ashley Page designed her ass off. Like, these knits are fire. They're fire. And they're still super in fashion. Some of them are even giving like a McBling type vibe. It's like if the 70s and the early 2000s had like a hot girl, teenage girl child. This one, low-key, I was surprised because this looked like a very basic book. But a lot of the patterns in here, I was like, okay, slay. Like, this is really cute. It's called Knit Style, Chic and Sexy Accessories by Barbara W. Larson from 2006. This book, she kind of ate. Like, the formatting of this book is weird. It's like tilted on its side for some reason when I was like reading this, which was very odd. I don't know why it's formatted that way, but I don't mind it too much. There's a really pretty like shrug in here. There's like really cute scarves. Like, there are some real bangers in here. Some of these are definitely giving more 90s than I expected since it was published in 2006, but I guess this is still like the mid 2000s. There was still a lot of like 90s influence on the fashion. Like, she offers like different color palettes for each of the projects too, so you can like mix and match and stuff if you don't like the actual color palette that's chosen for the pattern in the book, which I think is really cool. But this one is definitely worth checking out. It was kind of an underdog for me because I was like, oh, this looks kind of basic, but I'll look at it anyway because I'm looking for new stuff, and I was pleasantly surprised. Those are all of the knitting books that I have, or my favorites from all the ones that I have saved, because I've saved even more. Some of these I literally haven't even looked at yet. Like, straight up, I've not even opened them. I just have them in my favorites. But this was my video on the untapped resource for knitting. The people who like to make their own shit should go on the Internet Archive and look for knitting patterns. TLDR. And I just listed my favorites / the best ones. Okay, bye.